Chanyuan 草如何关爱动物敬畏生命? How should Chanyuan celestials care for animals and revere life? Xiefeng. January 14th, 2020. Translated by Chanyuan and edited by Kayer. All of the 8 dogs in one of our Xanadus died. None remain. This was a revelation which informed us that there was a problem with the collective consciousness of our Chanyuan celestials. It proved that not all the Chanyuan celestials in the Xanadu cared for life and revered life enough. It was a sign of the imperfection of the Chanyuan celestials' consciousnesses. At the same time, it meant that there was a huge crisis lurking in our Xanadu, because if animals died in rapid succession, then the people's survival was also in danger. If all kinds of lives grew vigorously there, then that place would be full of vigor and vitality, and its people would live happily and for a long time. Everyone's futures are related closely to other lives, and when they are indifferent to or even abusive of them, then there is no doubt that they will suffer unhappy and stressful futures. Can you imagine a person surviving in a barren desert? There is no doubt that they would not survive for very long by themselves. Why? Because there is no other life. It is only where all kinds of lives thrive and survive easily that people can live well. The 8 dogs in our Xanadu no longer exist. The main responsibility rested with the tour guide because I did not teach everyone how to care for life. It was strictly negligence on my part. Secondly, another main responsibility lied with Dinghai Celestial because I told him clearly to be responsible for feeding the dogs. This showed that Dinghai did not have a strong sense of responsibility and that he did not care for or revere life enough. It is not difficult to raise dogs. I have raised more than a dozen, except for one dog who had a pimple on its neck and needed to be taken to the veterinary hospital for surgery. None of the others have ever had any problems which required medications or injections, and they all lived well. To raise dogs, you only need to pay attention to 5 things. The first one is to feed them fresh food at least once every day, but never to let them eat it when it gets stale. The second is to keep them warm in cold weather because dogs cannot tolerate cold weather. The third is that their homes must be kept clean. The fourth is that they must be bathed regularly to remove any parasites from them. And finally, the fifth and most important rule is to make sure that they feel your love for them. It is unlikely that a dog will get sick and die prematurely if you follow these 5 rules. How should Chanyuan celestials care for animals and revere life? I do not need to say anything profound. I will just give you a few examples. When I was a teacher in Zhengye Pinjuan Body My No. 2 Middle School in Gansu, I kept a few cats and some chickens until the chickens were eventually discovered and eaten by weasels. The last chicken always followed a huang wherever she went. When a huang cooked in the kitchen, it followed her and laid at her feet. When a huang was asleep, it laid beside the bed. The cat always walked around her, but as soon as a huang sat down, it would jump into her arms immediately. Why was that? Because a huang took special care of and cherished all the little animals. We raised myna birds in the 4th branch, and one day, accidentally, one of them flew out and disappeared. A huang looked everywhere for it and shouted everywhere, "Myna, come home! Myna, come back!" Suddenly, I witnessed the myna fly over from a distant eucalyptus tree straight into her arms. Do you remember Snow Leopard, our dog from the 4th branch? Aside from his being born with high spirituality, most of his skills were taught to him by a huang. Do you know how a huang managed and protected Snow Leopard? At night, afraid that he would be frozen, she put a thick layer of cotton cloth in the garden where he slept. After the puppy lay down, she covered him with an old cotton towel. When she heard his chirping sound at night, she knew that he needed to relieve himself, so she got up quickly and opened the door for him. After he came back, she could then fall back asleep. We had a bird park in the 4th branch. No matter whether there were pigeons or parrots, there were basically no major problems. Do you know how the birds survived? A huang maintained their food and water every day and never missed one. Otherwise, the birds would have died long before. I dispute with the huang on a lot of issues, but one thing I have to admire about her is her love for the little animals. I knew a long time ago that a huang must be rewarded. If we treat all life kindly, then it would treat us kindly too. Today, of all the Chanyuan celestials, a huang and I have the best living conditions. Why do we? The fundamental reason is that we have treated life kindly, and it is a reward from Tao. Songhai Celestial and Jiaoyi Celestial should still remember that when I left Zimbabwe before April 18th, I explained to them that we must treat all the lives in the family well, even the grasses and trees, so that there will be no crises in our lives. Even small trees and grasses will help to eliminate many risks. Do you remember how I treated bees and mice kindly? Remember that in our homes, killing snakes is never allowed. Animals are more afraid of cold than people are. I raised a very smart black German Shepherd for the first time in Zimbabwe. One year in winter, it was not particularly cold. Usually, the dog slept in his doghouse in the yard. But one day as I opened the door, he insisted on coming inside. I did not normally let him in, but after he squeezed in that day, he would not leave no matter how I pushed him. After a while, I found him hiding curled up behind a sofa and looking at me pitifully. I finally realized that it was too cold outside and that the dog needed warmth. From then on, whenever it was cold, I would add more layer of insulation, even shabby blankets to his doghouse. We once had 2 kittens in the 4th branch which had been brought from Linsong by Chanyuan, but they both died soon thereafter. I will tell you why that happened. Both of them had frozen to death. After I found that one of the kittens had frozen to death, I hurriedly took the other one to my room and let it crawl into my bed, but sadly, many of its internal organs had already stopped functioning and it died the following day. I raised a few dogs when I lived in a villa next to an embassy in Zimbabwe. In the end, there were too many of them, so I gave a dog named De Huang to the girl who washed clothes for me. De Huang was tall and powerful, but he died within a few days after the girl's father brought him into their home. The girl said that ever since he brought De Huang into their house, he never ate or drank, and finally succumbed to thirst and starvation. Another 2 dogs I raised in Zimbabwe, Lem and Rambo, were both fine when I was there, but as soon as I left, they died in rapid succession. Rambo was said to have been hit by a car. Given the above examples, I want everyone to know how to love animals and revere lives. Ask yourself, have you ever cared for lives like this? If you have not, it means that the structure of your life is still too rough and that you are not yet worthy to enter heaven.